Okay, today's daf is Mem Zayin. In Yoma, we're going to begin the new perek, which is Hotziu Lo, in the very top of the page. Hotziu Lo et hakaf et hamachta. They brought out to the Kohen. Now remember, what we are up to in the process of the Avodat Yom Kippurim is that the Kohen has been brought. First, he's done the morning service, he's done the Korban Tamid, all of the Avodah of the Tamid in the morning. He did his Vidui, right? He did his first confession on the bull. Then he went and he selected the Sa'ir L'Azazel and the Sa'ir L'Shem and the Sa'ir L'Azazel. Then he went back to his bull, said another confession, slaughtered the bull, received the blood from the bull, but then he has to do the Ketoret before he goes in with the blood to apply the blood. So now we're up to the Ketoret service, the most famous part of the service, because that's when he actually goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim for the first time. So they bring out to the Kohen Gadol the kaf and the machta. The kaf is a spoon, some kind of a spoon-shaped vessel, and the machta is the pan of the fire. Okay, chafan milo chofnav. He takes the fullness of his hands. In other words, he fills his two hands with the ketoret. V'natan letoch hakaf, and he puts it into the kaf. The kaf is what he's going. So he takes from the ketoret. He cups his hands together and he takes the ketoret into his hands and he places that into the kaf. Hagadol lefi godlo, ve'katan lefi kotno. The large person according to his size and the small person according to his size. In other words, if he's very big, he has big hands, then it's going to be a larger quantity. If he has smaller hands, it'll be a smaller quantity. That's fine. That's the measurement. And when he goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, he does something unusual, which is he takes the fire pan in his right hand and the kaf in his left hand, which means the thing that he's going to actually be offering, which is the ketoret, is held in the left hand instead of the right hand. That's really the only time you ever find that. Okay? So the Gemara's first problem is machta tanale. And the Bach says on the side, ha tanale. We already learned about the machta. How did we already learn about the fire pan? Because we said previously that nataleta machta. This was, this was discussed in the process already. That he takes the machta va'ala l'rosh hamizbeach and he goes onto the top of the altar. V'choteh v'yored, and he goes up and he shovels fire from the outside mizbeach. He puts it onto the pan, and then he comes down. Right? So we've already seen that he has the machta, because it doesn't say that they give it to him. It says that he already had this pan to go up, or this shovel to go up, and to take whatever fire he needed to take from the mizbeach. So why is it telling us now all of a sudden they bring it to him? What does it mean they bring it to him? Right, so does Rashi say on the side? Oh no, he doesn't explain it. So that's the question of the Gemara. Gemara answers hatam machta de gehalim v'acha machta diktoret. There were two mahtot. There were two pans. One pan was the pan of the fire that the Kohen Gadol already had with him. He didn't have to have it brought out to him especially. He had it already. And he went and he took the fire from the mizbeach. That was something separate. But this is called machta diktoret. What does that mean? Ditani, as it says in the Braita, hotziu lo kaf rekan milishkat hakelim. What they did was they brought him an empty spoon, right? Spoon-shaped thing, from the chamber of the vessels, and they brought him a pan full of ketoret. In other words, there are two pans. One pan is the pan that is the fire pan that he already had. He already filled it with the fire. But now they bring him a large pan full of ketoret. It's like when you go to kolbe and they bring you that rice, the large pan, right, of rice. So the large pan of ketoret, and now he has to put his hands into that large pan and take out just the meloch ofnaf. Okay, so there's two machtot. This one they especially brought to him, and then he's going to take his hands full, and he's going to take whatever he takes from the large pan and put it into the spoon-shaped vessel. It's hard to call it a spoon because obviously it would be a really large spoon because he's holding, a lot of ketoret in his hands. And then it says, "Chafan milo chofnav v'noten toch hakaf hagadol lefi godlo v'akatan lefi kotno v'kach hayta midata." So this was the measurement. So then the Gemara asks, "Kaf b'yom kippurim lamali milo chofnav v'hevia marachmana." Where do you get the idea that there's a kaf, that there's a vessel that you place the ketoret in when you bring it into the Kodesh HaKodeshim? In the Torah, all it says is milo chofnav v'hevi. He should take his two hands full of ketoret and go in and bring it in. Where does it say kaf? Where does it say that he uses a spoon or any vessel to carry the ketoret? The Gemara answers, Mishum de la ifshar. Because it's not possible any other way. Why not? How's he going to do it? If you're going to tell me he goes in twice, in other words, what's the problem? The Kohen Gadol also has to bring the fire pan to burn the ketoret, and he needs to bring the ketoret itself. Now, if his two hands are full with the ketoret, how's he going to carry the fire pan? So you'll tell me, he'll go in twice. First, he'll bring the fire pan in. Then he'll bring the ketoret in. He'll come back out. He'll take the ketoret. He'll go in. No, it can only be once. Hava'a achat amar rahmana v'lo shetei havaot. It can only be one coming in. It can't be two steps. There has to be one step of bringing hava'a. That doesn't mean he only goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim once, because he actually goes in more than once. He goes in once for the Ketoret, once to sprinkle the blood, right? He goes in again, and he goes in even to take the implements, to take the vessels, the kelim out. So he goes in a few times, but the bringing of the Ketoret has to be done in one process. So then, how can he do it? Okay, so how about this? Let him take the Ketoret in his hands. So he's got his two hands full of ketoret, and we'll put the fire pan on top of his hand, on top of his hands. In other words, he'll rest the fire pan on the ketoret that's in his hands. He can't put it directly on his hands; he'll be burned. But it's heaped up in his hands, so he'll put it on top of that, and he'll carry it like that. But the problem is, if he does that, but then what is he going to do when he gets inside? Right? How is he going to put it down without dropping it? One possibility is nishkale b'shinei v'nachtei lamachta. He could use his teeth. He could grab it with his teeth and put it down. The Gemara answers, no. You wouldn't do that in front of a human king. In front of the Holy One, blessed be He, you're going to do that. The King of Kings, you're going to hold stuff with your teeth? That's not very classy. You can't do that. Therefore, there's no way to do it. And since there's no way for the Kohen Gadol to be able to manage bringing with his hands full of ketoret, bringing also the fire pan into the Kodesh HaKodeshim. There's no logistical way to do it, so therefore we use the kaf. And where do we get the idea that you can use a kaf, a spoon-shaped vessel? We get it from the Nisi'im, because what does it say in the Nisi'im on Chanukah? Kaf achat asara zahav mle'a ketoret. So how did they bring the ketoret? Kaf achat, right? They brought a large. It was 10 weights of gold. It was a large vessel that they brought full of ketoret. So therefore we see a precedent for using a kaf for ketoret. He brings the fire pan in his right hand and the ketoret in his left hand, which is an unusual thing, right? The Gemara asks, Yatziva bar'a v'giora b'shmei shemaya. This is a famous Talmudic phrase that appears several places in Shas, which means the citizen is on the ground and the stranger is in the heavens. What does that mean? It means this is a reversal of the status of these two things. Meaning, what does it mean? The citizen meaning that you're making the citizen lower than the stranger, like they do sometimes in our country. They give more rights to the people who come from the outside than the people who are citizens. Sometimes, right?
They also give more rights to the animals.
Yeah, sometimes. But they're citizens. But that's what it means. Yatziva ba'ar'a v'giora b'shmei shmaya. So what's the question of the Gemara? The question of the Gemara is the ketoret is what's being offered. That should be in your right hand. The machta, the fire pan, is just the means. It's just a machshir. It's just what burns the ketoret, but it's not the thing being offered. So shouldn't that be in the left hand? Why are you putting the machta in the right hand? The Gemara says zo meruba v'zo mu'etet. The answer is because the machta, the shovel of coals, is much heavier than the typical amount of ketoret you're going to have. So therefore, you need your right hand, because we're assuming that the Kohen Gadol is a righty, right?
Not like me.
Most of the time, that's what they assumed, right? Va'afilu bazman sheshneim shavin, and even in a case where they're equal, uchemase de Rabbi Yishmael ben Kimchit, because Rabbi Yishmael ben Kimchit, who was one of the Kohanim HaGedolim, was very large physically in stature, and therefore, and the Gemara and these words, some delete them, like the Bach on the side deletes them. It says zo chama v'zo tzonenet, that even in cases where it happened to be that the Kohen Gadol had such large hands that the amount of ketoret, the weight of the ketoret, was equal or even more than what was in the makhta, still one is hot and one is cold. In other words, the makhta needs the right hand, because since it's hotter, you need to balance it better than the ketoret, which is a cold item and maybe requires less coordination to be able to hold it and to manage it. So therefore you need the right hand to hold the makhta, even in a case where the ketoret is heavier. You still would use the right hand for the hot item. Amru alav al Rabbi Ishmael ben Kimchit. They said about Rabbi Ishmael ben Kimchit, Shayach hofen arba'at kavin bimlo chofnav. He would bring 4 kav in his hands. He had huge hands. Okay, so he would bring 4 kav in his hands. And ve'omer, and he used to say, Kol hanashim zeredu vezered ima ala lagag. All of the women zeredu, whatever that means, but the zered of my mother went up to the roof, which means something to the. He's trying to explain why was he so big. Either something his mother did, or something about his mother made him very big. What was it? So Ikad Amri, some say ba'arsan. He's talking about what she used to eat when she was pregnant. She ate a certain type of cereal or a certain type of grain that, I don't know, maybe it was gluten-free, but I don't think so. Right? There's a certain type of grain. Okay. The Rabbi Bar Yonatan, like Rabbi Bar Yonatan says. Yeah. The Amar Rabbi Bar Yonatan, Amar Rabbi Yechiel, because Rabbi Bar Yonatan said that Rabbi Yechiel said arsan yafa or yafeh lachole, that eating arsan, eating this type of a grain, was good for somebody who's sick. So since his mother made sure to eat a lot of this stuff while she was pregnant, that made his mother especially strong and especially good health, and that made him grow especially well. What it means is the semen, the shechvat zera by which he was conceived, was of the best type. Zered here meaning that it was finely chosen. Okay, the Rabbi Abahu, like Rabbi Abahu says, Rabbi Abahu Rami, because Rabbi Abahu showed a contradiction. It says vatazereni hayla milchama uchtiv hama'azereni hayla milchama, because we know that the Song of David appears in 2 places. The Song of David appears in Sefer Shmuel. The Song of David also appears in Tehillim, in Yud Chet in Tehillim. It's a very long parak. It also appears in towards the end of Shmuel Bet. It's one of the haftarot that we read. So he says in one, Vat hazereni hayl without an aleph. Okay, and one says Vat azereni hayl with an aleph. What's the difference? So he says the answer is Amar David Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem said before the Holy One, blessed be He, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the world. Zeritani vezeraztani. Okay, you winnowed me, meaning you chose the best to make me. You made me with the best materials. Vizerastani, and you strengthened me to use what I had for the best. In other words, you inspired me. So one is hama'azereni means, so has vatazereni without the aleph means that you selected the materials from which you made me as best as possible. Vata'azereni with an aleph means, and you gave me the strength to use it, right? So in the same way, what he's saying is Zered ima alalagag means that for some reason his mother only took in the seed that made the best kids, that made the strongest kids. Okay, her body was very selective and only took the best genetic material, we would say today, right? Sifted out the best DNA for him to be chosen. Yeah, okay. So now we say about Rabbi Ishmael, Amru alav al Rabbi Ishmael ben Kimchit. They said about Rabbi Ishmael ben Kimchit, Pamachat siper dvarim im Aravi achad bashuk. Once upon a time, he was speaking with a certain Arab in the marketplace. V'nittizat zinra mipiv al begadav, and some spittle came from the Arab's mouth onto the clothing of Rabbi Ishmael ben Kimchit. V'nichnas yeshvav achiv v'shimesh tachtav, and as a result, his brother Yeshvav had to come and serve in his place. Verata iman shenei kohanim gedolim b'yom echad, and therefore his mother got to see 2 kohanim gedolim in one day serve. In other words, 2 of her sons kohanim gedolim in one day. Veshuv amru alav al Rabbi Shmuel ben Kimchit, and it furthermore was said about Rabbi Shmuel ben Kimchit that pamachat yatzav v'siperim adon echad bashuk. He had to go out and speak with some political person outside. V'nittizat zinra mipiv al begadav, and again some of the spittle came from the mouth of the non-Jewish guy onto the clothing of Rabbi Shmuel ben Kimchit. V'nechnas Yosef achiv v'shimesh tachtav, and Yosef ben Kimchit came in and served in his place. And again, his mother saw 2 Kohanim Gedolim of her sons serve in the same day. In other words, what happened was, in both, according to Rashi, both of these events happened on Yom Kippur itself. That in the middle of the Yom Kippur Avodah, the Rabbi Ishmael ben Kimchit became Tameh, because the spittle of the non-Jew halachically is viewed as the spittle of a Zav, and therefore the which is an avatum'ah, and therefore the Kohen Gadol is now invalid to serve, and he had to pass it to his brother, so his brothers got the chance to serve. Now, some say, what? Yeah, but we don't keep these rules of tum'ah today. Yeah, so in the Rashi says that these interactions with the non-Jews actually happened on Yom Kippur itself. Other Mefarshim say no, it's unlikely that he was in the shuk talking with somebody on Yom Kippur in the middle of everything he had to do. It probably means the day before or something like that he was invalidated from serving at the last minute. In any case, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Shiva banim hayu la lekimchit. This is a very, very famous drash, very, very famous agada, that Kimchit had 7 sons. V'kulan shemishu b'kuna gedola, and all of them ended up being the Kohanim Gedolim at some point. Amru la chachamim, the rabbis said to her, Ma'asit, what did you do? Okay, that you merited this. Okay, what was the shezachit lekach? What did you do to merit this distinction? Amra lahem, she said to them, Miyamai lo ra'u korot beiti kal eis ari. She said that the braids of my hair have never been seen by the walls of my house. In other words, the walls of my house never saw the braids of my hair. I cover my hair all the time. I'm very tsanua. I'm very. I observe the rules of tzniut very carefully. Amrullah, they said to her, Harbe asuken v'lo ho'ilu. There were many people who also did this and were very religious, but it didn't help them. In other words, there were many women who were very modest in their homes, and they were nashim tzinuot, and yet they did not merit this distinction. So she didn't answer them. She didn't praise herself any further than that. But apparently, she was unique in her, in this regard. Now, in Rashi on the side, he quotes from Talmud Yerushalmi. What is the connection between the modesty of the woman and the Kohen? Because it says, the pasuk says that Kol kevoda bat melech penima, that all of the honor of the princess is penima, is inside. Mim mishpitzot zahav levusha, and from greater than the mishpitzot zahav, than the golden placeholders, the golden decorations, is her clothing. And mishpitzot zahav is a reference to is also a remez to the big day Kohen Gadol, because the Kohen Gadol had mishpitzot zahav. He had those settings of gold into which the jewels were placed in the choshen. So it's a reference, meaning that if the mother is a ishat tzenu'ah, she's a very modest woman, so then the mishpitzot zahav, she will have the zechut that her sons will have the decoration of the Kohen Gadol. In other words, because she was modest and didn't use her external appearance to attract attention, one day her sons will have the special, kavod of being able to attract their, attention with their external appearance, but the kavod shamayim only, for the sake of being the Kohen Gadol. It's a beautiful connection. So now, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Bekumtso. What does it mean, Bekumtso? This is talking not about the Ketoret for a moment, but it's talking about the Mincha. That how was the Mincha done? A Korban Mincha was done that you would bring the flour. The Kohen Gadol would take a handful of the flour. That kometz is what's offered on the Mizbeach. The rest of it is called Shirayim. Okay, which is eaten, or in some cases burned. But only the kometz is offered. So it says, which means we don't say, well, this Kohen's hand holds exactly this amount of grams of flour, so we'll just take a measuring cup of that amount and we'll scoop it out. Why does he have to get his hands dirty? Right? We don't want to bother him. So the answer is no. It says, kumtso, that it has to be with his hand. They asked a question, what about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur? It doesn't say that he has to grab it with his hands. It just says it has to be milo. It has to be milo chofnav, the fullness of his hands. In other words, that's the measurement. But maybe he could figure out how much volume is held by his, in his hands, in his cupped hands, and just get a measuring cup and do it that way. Why does he have to do it with his hands? So hatamu dechtiv kumtov al hachalok de la ktiv bechofnav ela milo chofnav. So since over there by the mincha it says it has to be bikumto, with his hand, so that's different. Here it only says melochofnav. It only says the measure of what's in his hands. It doesn't say that it has to be with his hands. So maybe he doesn't need to use his hands. O dilma yalif melo mikumto. Or maybe since in both cases it says the fullness. It says it says veherim imeno bikum. It says melokumto, that it has to be the fullness of his hand, also by the mincha. And here it says melo chofnav, even though there it emphasizes bekumtso also, that it has to be with his hand. So there's an extra thing there. But in another pasuk it also says melo kumtso, the fullness of his hand. So maybe we compare the two. Just like mincha, it has to be the fullness of his hand, then it has to be with his hand. So too with chafina, with the taking of the ketoret, it has to be the fullness of his hand, and it has to be with his hands. Perhaps that's how we should interpret it. So the Gemara answers, Tashima, come and listen. It says in the Mishnah that whether you were large or small, whatever fits into the hands of the Kohanim, kach haita midata. This is the measurement. That's what it said in our Mishnah. So what does it mean, kach haita midata? What it means is, doesn't it mean my lav shim ratza lasod midah? The word acheret is not necessary. Oseh, doesn't it mean by saying v'kachi midata, that the amount that fits into the Kohen Gadol's cupped hands is the amount that you need? Right? V'kachi midata, and this is the measurement. By saying this is the measurement, the implication is that if I took a measuring cup that equaled that, it would also be fine. It's saying that's the measurement. The measurement is established relative to the particular Kohen Gadol, but it's a measurement. So if you have another tool to extract the exact amount, that's fine.
Does the word kometz mean hand, or is it
Bik kumtso means with his hand.
But the word kometz is that
it means his hand.
That's hand.
It's also used as a measurement. Like amma means my arm, but it also means a measurement. So it's both. Bik kumtso means with his hand. With his hand, yeah. Melo kumtso means the fullness of his hand, which is where it comes from. In other words, that's where that measurement comes from, that it's relative to the hand, but it has to be done with the hand also. So since our Mishnah says that this was the measurement, the implication is that even if I'm able to get that measurement, but not using the hand, using a measuring cup, it should be okay. So the Gemara says, lo, not necessarily. That's what it means. What it means is that this same measurement, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have to use his hands. No, he does have to use his hands. What it's by saying means that the same amount that he separates with his two hands, before going into the Kodesh HaKodeshim to prepare, as we learned in the beginning, that's the exact amount he needs to lift and put onto the hot coals when he gets into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, because he's going to do it twice. The Gemara asks about it later, but concludes that he first takes they bring him a large pan, as we said before, like a large pan of rice. Okay, he puts his hand in, takes out what's called the melok chofnav, puts it into a vessel. Then when he goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim and he sets the coals down, he again has to pour the ketoret into his hands, which is a very, very difficult procedure to do, as we're going to learn about. So it has to be exactly the same amount, not missing anything, and he puts it onto the coals.
It seems we have three different terms for the same word.
No, kumcho is one hand. One hand.
Okay, so there's kometz, there's chofen, and there's yad. So what's the difference between...
Yad could be with your fingers.
Okay. So
I mean, kometz means your handful.
Handful.
Chofnav is two hands.
So
that's two hands. Yeah. Yad is just like to manipulate with your hand. It's kumtso really implies like the handful, like the cupped hand. Okay. Now, yeah. Shamat mina chofen v'chozer v'chofen. So are you telling me then that in order to understand our Mishnah, we have to conclude that there were two takings of the ketoret? First, the Kohen Gadol takes the ketoret before he goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim and puts it into the kaf. And then when he gets inside, he has to do it again. So then why does the Gemara later ask the question? No, Dilma, maybe, Shim Ratzah Lasod Midah Oseh, Inami, Shelo Yahsar, or Shelo Yahaser, Shelo Yotir. Or it means that he shouldn't have less or he shouldn't have more. In other words, we can interpret our Mishnah two possible ways, and it's not definitive. We can either interpret it to mean that he is allowed to make a measuring cup, that he doesn't have to use his hands, because it says whatever the measure of the Kohen Gadol that he's going to get with his hands is the measurement. So use a measuring cup. Or it could mean, alternatively, that that he should not diminish or increase. In other words, he shouldn't put any more. He shouldn't say, well, I have small hands, so since I only took this much, I'm going to take a little bit more and put it in. He shouldn't do that. Okay, it should be just exactly that amount. So either way, we can't definitively determine from our Mishnah what it means. Because our Mishnah could be saying, yes, you do have to use your hands. It's just telling you not to take any more or say I have very big hands, I'll take a little bit less. Okay? That's one possibility. Or, in fact, it could be that you could use a measuring cup. We can't determine it from our Mishnah. Could be interpreted either way.
Well, how do we do? I mean, the entire Shas is full of measurements. How do we do? What rule do we apply anytime we use a measurement? Because all of the measurements are comparative to something, like a hand or an elbow or
Yeah, but it's not part of the procedure. This is different. I mean, in other cases, you're using, let's say, an amah. It doesn't say you have to hold your arm up against it and determine how much amah. It does, no, but here, this is an actual part of the avodah that he's doing.
Right, so that's...
To take it. So the question is,
in other words, we're questioning that because it's part of the avodah, not because we're questioning how do we apply measurements.
No, of course, you don't have to take an olive to determine a kazayit. Nobody says that. You have to do it because that's just a measurement, a volume. If you know what it is, you know what it is. But here he's doing a procedure. So the question is, does the procedure physically, is it making a physical requirement or just a measurement requirement? Put it that way. In other words, is it prescribing a measurement or is it prescribing the method?
But then in that case, why is it said in those terms? In other words, it's said in the same term that you use when you use a measurement, like an olive or an egg, or in other words, the way that it's being presented is that...
Because it says he should take his handful. So does that mean he should take his handfuls literally? It's telling you how he has to do it. Or is it telling you how much he's supposed to take? That's the whole question. Right. You could read it either way. So the rabbi said, it says he should take a handful. This is again talking about the mincha. This is talking about the flour offering. So the question is, Yachol mivoratz, maybe you would think it could be overflowing. In other words, he has so much in his hand, it's coming out the sides. Right? When you have your hand really full and there can be stuff protruding from the sides. So therefore it says, bekumtso, it has to be in his hand. If you're telling me it has to be in his hand, maybe even just his fingers is enough. How do you know it has to be full? Maybe just if he closes his fingers on it, it should be enough. Talmud Lamar, melokumtso. It has to be a handful. You wouldn't say this is a handful if you just had under your fingers. It's got to be your whole palm full as well. So, which means the way that people normally take a handful. So when you say, if I tell you take a handful, you don't take this much just in your fingertips. You take a handful. But it shouldn't be coming out. How does he do it? Then so what he does is actually, we're going to learn more details about this, and this is specifically laid out mainly in Masechet Menachot, but basically he puts the side of his hand into the flour, and he curves his 3 center fingers forward. And that's what he holds. That's considered full. And then there shouldn't be anything protruding beyond that. Okay? Now normally if you're taking just a minchat solet, which means just plain flour, not, it hasn't been baked into a cake. So then what will happen is if you do that, any extra will just fall off. But if it's machvat u'marcheshet, it's one of those menachot where you bake it into a cake, where you bake it into some kind of one of those things. So then you need to wipe off with your thumb and your pinky whatever protrudes beyond the hand. Okay, so mochek bigodolo, he has to wipe it away with his bigodolo with his thumb milimala from the top, etzba'o ktana milamata, and with his pinky on the other side. V'zoi avodah kasha shebamikdash, and this was a very difficult avodah to do because you need to hold the 3 fingers in place while you're moving the thumb to clean one side and the pinky to clean the other side. Not so easy. The Gemara asks, Zohi v'tulo, are you telling me that this is a very difficult avodah, but there are no other difficult ones? Va'ika melika. What about melika, where you have to kill the bird from the back of its neck with your finger? Va'ika hafina. What about taking the hafina that was done, especially lifnai v'lifnim, when he would go into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the way that he had to reposition the ketoret in his hands was extremely difficult, as we're going to learn. Ela zohi me avodot kashot shabamikdash. What it means is this is one of the difficult things. Not that this was the only difficult thing, but it was a difficult thing. It wasn't so easy to take the mincha in your hand like this and to clean it off like this without losing any of what's in the center. It would be very difficult. Rabbi Yochanan says, by Rabbi Yoshua ben Uzza'ah asked, what about the flour that's caught between your fingers? What's the status of that flour? It's not in the middle of the palm, it's in between the fingers. Rav Papa said, "Tegavai lo tibailach, tevadai kometzu. Tebarai lo tibailach, tevadai shirayimu." The inside stuff, in other words, whatever. If you're looking at your hand and you see in between the fingers flour that you can see from the inside, that's for sure part of the inside. And if you turn your hand around, then you would see the flour on the outside of the fingers, on the back. That's definitely part of the outside. The question is, what about the other stuff? The question is, whatever's in between. In other words, it's stuck between your fingers, so it doesn't appear on the outside or the inside. You don't know what the status is. So what are you going to do then? And we're dealing with putting your hand in flour, so this is a very practical question, right? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hadar Pishata Rabbi Yoshua ben Uzza'ah. Later on, Rabbi Yoshua ben Uzza'ah was able to clarify or to answer the question that he asked. And what did he say? Safek didn't. It's a doubt. So of course the Mefarshim say, what do you mean he answered the question that he asked? His question was, what is the answer? And his answer is, we don't know. How's that? Right.
It's a better answer than
right. So the Rishonim say,
if there is an answer.
Right. So the commentaries say, well, either he means halachically it's undefined. You might say, in other words, we can't come to a halachic decision about it because it's in between the two categories. So therefore, we have to be stringent on both sides. We have to treat it like a
measurement depends on side of the hand of it.
Right.
Anyway, so that little bit makes that much difference.
Every bit has to be used. It has kedusha. So the question is, what kind of kedusha does it have? So he says it's a safek. So some people say it means it's a safek, that really it's either one or the other. We just can't tell, right? Or it's too hard to tell. Or halachically, it doesn't fit into either category, so we have to treat it like both or neither. So how do you do it? So Hechi, what are we going to do? Amar Rabbi Chanina says, Maktir kometz l'chodei. First you take the kometz, you take whatever's in the middle of your hand, and you offer that. Tachila, v'hadar ben habenaim. And then you offer what was in between the fingers. You burn it separately. Okay? Te'i amrat ben habenaim beresha, because if you do the middle part, what's in between the fingers first, dilma shirayim nino, ta'ulu shirayim shechasru ben kmitzal haktara. Okay, and then you're going to have a different problem, which is when you offer the kometz of a mincha, when you offer that handful that you take out of a mincha, the rest of the mincha must remain intact 100%. If even a little bit of it becomes diminished, you can no longer offer the kometz. So if the part that was in between your fingers is considered part of the shirayim, part of the rest of the mincha, and not part of the kometz, then if you offer it first, you offered part of the rest of the mincha, you ruined its completeness, and now you can't offer the kometz. So you offer the whatever's in the middle of the hand first. Now whatever's in between your fingers, you can offer separately. Okay? Va'amar more, and the master said, if anything happens to any of the leftovers in between separating the handful and offering it, you can't offer the handful anymore. So that's why you can't do what's in between the fingers first. Okay? But now the Gemara asks a more powerful question. But wait a second, my friends. If you're telling me that the kometz, that we're worried that the thing between your fingers is right, it's a state of doubt, and it might be that it is shirayim. It might be that it's the part of the mincha that doesn't get burnt, right? Because it's the part that gets eaten by the kohanim. How can you burn it at all? How can you tell me to burn the handful and then to burn what's in between the fingers, when what's in between the fingers is itself a doubt? It might be one of the parts of the mincha that is not allowed to be burnt, because that's the whole doubt. But by burning it first, you might be diminishing the leftovers of the mincha, rather than offering something that's supposed to be part of what's offered. So if you're concerned that it might be part of the leftovers, how can you ever burn it? Burning the leftovers is not allowed, because it says kol shemimenu leishim, anything that part of it is burned, tarihu b'val taktiro, is subject to the rule of bal taktiro, that you cannot burn it itself.
But it's not invalid; it's in a state of doubt.
It's in a state of doubt, but then how can you burn it is the question. You have a different safek. In other words, if it might be part of the kometz, in which case it should be offered with the kometz, but you can't offer it with the kometz because maybe it's not part of the kometz and you're diminishing the rest of the offering. But the thing is, if it's part of the rest of the offering and you go and burn it afterwards, you're also violating a deoraita possibly, because you're burning part of the mincha that's not supposed to be burnt. So how can you do that? Amar Rabbi Yehuda bre de Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, said, "De maktir le leshum etzim." You put it onto the mizbeach not for the sake of being burnt as an offering, but for the sake of etzim, like firewood. The kid Rabbi Eliezer, like Rabbi Eliezer says, the Tanya, as it says in the Braita, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, lereach nichoach iyata ma'aleh. Because according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's true that you can't offer the shirayim, you can't offer the remaining part of the mincha as a korban, but le'etzim you could. you can put it up and say, if this is really supposed to be burnt as part of the kometz, then this is part of the kometz. And if not, I'm putting it up not as an offering.
That's
right.
usually what's done in a state of doubt.
Yeah, but you
it's this status that treated this way, it's this.
But that's only if there's leeway on the other side. In other words, the chidush here is that you might think it's either or. That if I offer it and it's not supposed to be offered, I'm doing an isur deoraita. If I don't offer it and I'm supposed to be offered, I'm failing. So he's making leeway. He's saying actually there's an in-between case. If I offer it, lishum etzim, not as an offering, but as firewood, then I can offer even something that's normally not allowed to be offered.
With something that it would not have been.
Wouldn't be a violation per se, right? That makes sense only according to Rabbi Eliezer. However, the Elul Rabbanan might yikal mimar. But according to the rabbis, what can we say? In other words, what are we going to say about the rabbis? The Chachamim don't agree that you can offer, let's say, the shirayim, the leftovers of a mincha, the part that's supposed to be eaten, that you can offer it as firewood. They don't agree with that. So how are they going to allow you to take what's in between your fingers and put it up on the mizbeach? Answer is, they will say, Amar Rav Mari, what you'll do is they will have rotund kohanim do it. In other words, they'll have chubby kohanim do the mincha. Why? Because since they have fatter fingers, there's no space in there. Okay? Only skinny people have this problem. Only skinny people will have space between their fingers. But somebody who is very large, his hands are closed, right? Nothing is going to get in there. So they will use a kohen that doesn't have this problem. So therefore, now that we came to this, Rabbi Eliezer, even Rabbi Eliezer will say that it's better to do that. In other words, if you have a practical solution, that you don't have to get into any of this stuff, you don't have to get into, worrying about which part really should be offered and which part shouldn't be offered, so then better that you use people who are not going to bring up this question altogether. You're not going to have this issue with them because they are overweight and they, and they won't have the flour in between their fingers to be concerned with. So even Rabbi Eliezer will require that, and will not say that you should offer the kometz and then offer what's in between the fingers. We won't offer what's in between the fingers because we'll use kohanim that are not going to have the problem of having flour in between their fingers to begin with.